Hey guys, it's Rob here. Multiple of you guys have asked for this video, so I'm doing it. What if Aaron Fechter, the creator of the Rock-afire Explosion, had made the decision to sell the Rock-afire Explosion to Showbiz Pizza Time Inc. when they asked him to sell them the rights? Today, we're going to be answering that question. Before we begin, I'd like to thank these people for requesting the video idea. I'd also like to say real quick that I'm not going to be doing much research for this video, trying to figure out exactly, statistically, what would have happened. I'm trying to have fun here, so I'm going to just answer this question using the knowledge I have of the company and basing it off the events that happened prior. Anyways, let's answer the question. What if Showbiz Pizza Place owned the Rock-afire Explosion? Our story begins in the late 80s, with Showbiz Pizza Time Inc. asking Aaron Fechter for the rights to the Rock-afire Explosion. Aaron has said in videos before that the company preferred having the Rock-afire Explosion characters over the Chuck E. Cheese characters, and wanted to obtain the rights to the Rock-afire Explosion characters as a result. Now, of course, in real life, Aaron refused to give up the rights to the Rock-afire Explosion, and the shows turned into Chuck E. Cheese shows, as did the Showbiz Pizza Place locations. In this timeline, though, Aaron would end up giving the rights to the Rock-afire Explosion. Maybe they came to a monetary agreement or something. I don't know. The important part is that he would give up the rights to the Rock-afire Explosion in this timeline, and this allows Showbiz Pizza Time Inc. to continue using the Rock-afire Explosion characters, and also to do whatever they wanted with them. I would imagine the conflicts between creative engineering and Showbiz Pizza Time Inc., however, would still mean that they would have broken up and no longer worked together. I'm not going to be mentioning what happened to airing creative engineering, for now at least. As for Showbiz Pizza Time Inc., some big changes would be happening to the stores, the Chuck E. Cheese ones specifically. That's because concept unification would occur, but not to turn every Showbiz Pizza place into Chuck E. Cheese. Instead, Chuck E. Cheese locations would be turned into Showbiz Pizza Place locations. They wouldn't be getting three-stage Rock-afire shows, though. They couldn't after breaking up with creative engineering. Instead, they had to turn the currently existing Chuck E. Cheese Cyberamic stages into Rock-afire Explosion characters. So, how would they do it? Well, there's definitely multiple ways you could go about this, but here's what I came up with. The idea of two stages would be implemented here, where balcony stages would be removed in turn for a two-stage. The main difference is that the current Cyberamics would be used, but reworked into the Rock-afire Explosion characters, and changing the mechs a bit to reflect such. On a two-stage Rock-afire Explosion setup like this, it would basically be like Chuck E. Cheese's two-stage but reversed. To the left would be your main Rock-afire Explosion, from left to right being Squally, who became Duke, Munch, who became Fats, Jasper, who became Beach Bear, and Chucky, who became Mitzi. On the other part of the stage, to the right, would be a modified Helen Cyberamic that became Billy Bob, with the scenery being the Showbiz Pizza campground. Sitting on top of the tent would be Looney Bird, which would be a retrofitted Warblet. The basic idea is that the mech would be reworked so that only one of the birds from the Warblet's mech would be used, and would be changed to look like Looney Bird with new cosmetics. Also, all the Cyberamics would be full bodies. Ralph and Earl were omitted and showed up on the TV screens instead. For any interested, the showroom would be covered up during the day and would be worked on at night during closed hours. The cabaret acts would still perform, with them having brief show tapes like the Rolf and Earl one in real life, that hinted at the removal of the Pizza Time players in exchange for the Rock-afire Explosion. This two-stage concept unification idea would be tested in 1989 at a random location, maybe a California or Texas location, with it becoming a success. As a result, the plan went past the testing phase, and it was decided that every CEC location would become a Showbiz Pizza location. Cabaret acts would be left alone, aside from their show tapes, of course, that would get rid of any mention of Chuck E. Cheese and instead would mention the Rock-afire Explosion. By 1992, all existing Chuck E. Cheese's pizza locations would be converted into Showbiz Pizza Place locations, and would be required to move all artwork mentioning the Chuck E. Cheese characters, as well as changing the exterior to be Showbiz Pizza. Another change that would happen across both original Rock-afire Explosion shows and Cyberamic shows is that they would now use show tapes made by corporate instead of creative engineering, which would be unfortunate. Throughout the 90s, the same type of remodels as Chuck E. Cheese got in real life would happen, with Showbiz Pizza Time Inc. trying to compete with the Discovery Zone with things such as the play tubes. Maybe they could have some sort of mysterious Lost Forest vibe? That would be cool. Otherwise, the other aspects of the remodel would be the same, though by phase 2 things would start changing with the Rock-afire Explosion. Seeing as the 21st century was coming up, Showbiz Pizza Time Inc. decided it was time to make some big changes. The first one would be to change their name to Showbiz Pizza Inc., removing the time from the name. The next change was to rebrand the Rock-afire Explosion, slightly. Instead of being based in a forest, the stage was to become like a more traditional concert stage, with the grass being removed and replacing it with black plywood. The characters would also be rebranded a bit, having their outfits focus less on their personalities and instead trying to give them a more unified band style look. This also meant that all the characters got full sets of clothes, and characters like Duke having his spacesuit removed and Beach Bear getting more clothes. Characters like Billy Bob also got more clothes, putting less emphasis on his country aspect and focusing more on the band slash rock side. His bass guitar would also be switched out for an electric guitar, similar to Beach Bear's. Looney Bird would become a sound man of sorts, handling the effects and sounds of the show. His can would be painted black to better fit the new stage design. Rolf and Earl's stage backdrop would be replaced with a Seinfeld style brick backdrop, and Rolf would gain pants, as well as Earl getting some new clothes to better suit the band style. The biggest change, however, came in the late 90s. With Showbiz Pizza Inc. using the same animatronics for nearly 2 decades, they wanted to introduce a new animatronic to keep things fresh. Well, more specifically, it would be two animatronics, both created by Garner Holt. I think you can see where I'm going with this. Basically, they would create a Studio C Chuck equivalent to Billy Bob and Looney Bird. Billy Bob would be on a similar stage setup to the Studio C Beta and Kappa, with tiled wood instead of carpet. It would have a black brick backdrop, with the Billy Bob animatronic being at the center of it, having a mic stand in front of him. He would be wearing the same clothes as the other stage setups, and also have the same guitar. Looney Bird would be inside a black can and would peek out of it to interact with Billy Bob. The entire stage setup would also have curtains, of course. Like the original Studio C Chuck, Billy Bob had 32 movements. The first one would be tested at one of those first locations where Rock-afire Explosion concept unification occurred, and would replace the Rock-afire 2 stage there. In fact, the plan was to phase out a couple dozen of the Cyberamic locations and replace the stages with the Billy Bob 1 stage. So they did, though they also opened more stores that had these 1 stages in them. Smaller variants without the Looney Bird animatronic also opened, although this was mostly at smaller locations. The original plan, like with Studio C, was to phase out the other characters, but ultimately this never happened, and instead these stages incorporated the other characters through the TV screens. Cabaret acts were also phased out around the time the one stage was introduced, with them being removed for spare parts and also to save money and modernize. Throughout the late 90s and 2000s, these changes went over well with them, the changes managing to appeal to newer generations. They started to run into issues in the late 2000s and early 2010s, however, when they began to lose money. So in 2012, they decided to do another large rebrand and turn the Rock-afire Explosion into 3D, plus change up their designs some. Billy Bob became the leader of the band, as if that sort of leadership role wasn't implied already, and the other characters became more like side characters. Emphasis was put back onto their character traits, like in the 80s and early 90s. Character outfits would also reflect this, being back to their original outfits. This would also apply to the one stage, which would change Billy Bob back into his original overalls, something the one stage never had. Other changes also came, specifically budget cuts. The latex masks of the characters were decided to be phased out and replaced with plastic masks that wouldn't need to be replaced. Curtains also stopped being programmed, and prop characters such as Choo Choo and Antioch would be removed. Plus, puppets of the characters would also see an uptick in usage on the show tapes around this time as well. Think you guys may see where this is going. Throughout the 2010s, even more changes came, with the company no longer doing covers and instead switching to purely original songs starting in 2016. The worst of it came starting in 2017 with the 2.0 remodel, in which they decided to start phasing out the animatronics and replace them with a dance floor. The remodel did more than that, of course, modernizing the stores similarly to how Chuck E. Cheese locations did the 2.0 remodel, but with the main difference being the usage of the Rock-afire Explosion characters instead of Chuck E. Cheese characters. The concept unification stage would be targeted specifically, with most of them being removed by 2023, and also the other stage variants becoming less common as more and more 2.0 locations popped up. In 2023, the majority of locations would be 2.0 locations, with the rest being animatronic locations that were in varying conditions at this point due to the lack of care for them. The least common stage type would have become the cyberamic stage, with only 5 of them remaining. As you can see, it essentially parallels what has happened in real life, just with the Rock-afire Explosion characters instead of Chuck E. Cheese. In modern day, the characters that once attempted to appeal to a general audience became very clearly aimed at younger children, and no longer would they want you to see them as animatronics, but instead through a large screen display while dancing on a dance floor. Which is where this answer ends. Although the outcome of this timeline is similar to our actual timeline, it was cool coming up with a concept unification version of the Rock-afire Explosion characters and seeing them as cyberamics. As for what happened to Aaron after he lost the rights to the Rock-afire Explosion, I guess he would have attempted to sell the remaining Rock-afire Explosion shows with other bands that they would have been retrofitted into, such as the Moonrockers. And although he would have sold a few, my assumption is that his company would have moved on to other things, though I can't think of what exactly. Regardless, this would have been an interesting timeline nonetheless. Thank you guys for watching this video. Coming up with the alternate ideas for what were originally Chuck E. Cheese concepts and turning them into Rock-afire Explosion concepts was fun, and I enjoyed doing it. If everything is going to plan, my next video should be one that is going to bring big changes to this channel, ones which I think you guys will like. But if that still isn't ready, my next video will be continuing the history videos with Little Rock, Arkansas, with a location that kept Showbiz Pizza Place elements even after concept unification. If you want to see either one of those videos, make sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you're notified when those come out. Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next video.